Intersecting Media presents.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
The next thing in late night talk.
Here we go.
While you're working, eating, and playing, he's watching.
It'll be like O10.
Keeping you informed.
Thank you.
Jason Page.
Demented and sad, but social.
Covering all the day's news from a studio somewhere in Southeast Asia.
Worldwide!
And talking about it with you.
Blah, blah, blah.
You're Up Late with Jason Page.
Hoo-ah!
Or up early.
Good morning.
But just stay up.
It is time.
Here's Jason.
Great to be with you on this Tuesday, January 26th, 2021. It still feels so weird to say that. I was having a conversation with my mother on Tuesday night in Singapore, Tuesday morning as it would be back in the U.S., and she was talking about how terrible it is. Time's just flying by so fast. And I presume that feeling has something to do with the fact that she's older now, and time flies, and you realize the clock is sort of ticking on life as it would be, and you want to kind of savor those days, and they just seem to go by so fast. And even at 43, sometimes I sort of feel that way. Anyway, thank you for being with us. We got a busy show. We had some technical issues yesterday. Those have been solved. You should be able to hear me fine. You should be able to see me fine. No audio cutting in and out. It's a beautiful thing. So with that behind us now, we move forward with the with this program on a nightly basis back in the U.S. every afternoon at noon, in Singapore and in Southeast Asia and in that part of the world. So we're going to sandwich some politics in between some sports that I want to get into today. As I said, this show has no one set thing that it's going to talk about day to day. There'll always be a little politics. We'll always try and get in a little bit of sports. And I have a lot of other interests: tech, travel, food, business. We'll talk about all those things as we sort of move through this program and journey together. And I'll figure out what resonates with you guys and what doesn't, what you have interest in as well, and what doesn't. You'll notice there's a chat box on the screen if you're watching the program. I am keeping an eye on the chat box. If you guys have anything that you want to weigh in with, questions for me, you're more than welcome to type them into the chat box, and I will answer those at some point during the show. We might even do a little thing. I'm trying to kind of figuring out the format of this thing, I said, in some way. And I always get a lot of questions from people asking about Singapore, asking me about life in this part of the world, because very few people from the United States ever get to travel even outside the country, much less to a place like Singapore or outside North America. Some people may go to Canada, Mexico, that sort of thing, but very few people get to travel to Asia, and in particular here, Southeast Asia. So a lot of times I get questions from people. And in that vein, if some of you want to ask me questions, you're more than welcome to do it, and I'll try and answer them for you here on the show. So with all that, again, having been said, as I said, I want to sandwich some politics in between some sports on the edges today. We'll do Curt Schilling to wrap up the show with Bob Nightengale, fantastic senior MLB writer over at USA Today. We'll get some thoughts with Bob Nightengale and see what he has to say about the fact that Curt Schilling was passed on by Hall of Fame voters to the tune of 16 votes. He got 71% of the vote, need to get 75. There is a political element to this and something of the cancel culture that a lot of people talk about that is playing a role in this. I want to talk about that. We'll do that to finish out the show. My second part of my conversation with John Aravosis, we'll have that coming up in about 10 minutes or so. And you could hear some thoughts from John on both the Democrats and the Republicans as it relates to where we are politically right now in the United States. We'll also get into some other items of the day, but I want to start out with kind of remembering and thinking back to where all of us were just a year ago. And it's kind of hard to fathom, but 1 year ago today, we were all mourning the loss, shockingly mourning the loss of Kobe Bryant. And I, like so many people, have a story as to how that all transpired and my remembrance of it. And it's this. I was back in Connecticut. I had just returned from Singapore. I had gotten back from Singapore on January 9th. And I was taking a nap. Weekend, afternoon, still adjusting to the time change from being back from Singapore. I was taking a nap, and my phone rings. And I always keep my phone right next to my ear because oftentimes I'd be the guy that cable news networks, MSNBC, Fox News, that they would call if there was a story in sports that popped. If something came really fast, they always kind of had me on speed dial that they knew they could get me. And either I'd come into the studio to talk about it down at 30 Rock, or they can get me on the phone or get me into a studio somewhere and I'd talk about it. And again, this was pre-COVID, so it was a different time. And that afternoon, I had the phone next to my ear and the phone rings. And I hear a panicked producer on the other end and tons of noise in the background. She says, Jason, can we get you on? Talk about the news. And I'm like, what's going on? I mean, I'm in a dead sleep. She says, about the news that Kobe Bryant died. And you just go white. Not that I could see myself, but I'm sure I went white. And jaw-dropping moment where you're learning that this iconic sports figure has died. Now, mind you, there was still not a lot of confirmation on the story at this point. I think TMZ was reporting it. MSNBC was not yet, and NBC News was not yet going to air with the fact that Kobe had died. They were saying there was a helicopter crash, but they were not yet going to the air with the fact that Kobe Bryant had died. They were simply asking if I'd come on and talk about it because there was the assumption and there had been the stories out there that he had died. And then there was all the other stories about whether or not his whole family was on the plane. I think ABC News had gotten that one wrong. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I don't think I am. So there was still so much going on. My head is swirling. I get put on hold, and I'm on hold forever. I mean, they never had me on hold this long. It might have been 20 minutes. And finally, once they confirmed the news that Kobe had died, they go to Mike Tirico for his reaction on the passing of Kobe. And then right after Mike Tirico, the very next person that MSNBC talked to was me. And what do you say in that moment? The emotion that's running through you. It's very hard to kind of keep it together in those times where you're on TV or on radio and some news has broken. I was on the air when the Ray Rice video, the elevator video came out. I was actually hosting my show when that video came out on TMZ. And that's another one of those moments where you got to kind of gather yourself. Okay, here we go. Covering those sort of breaking news stories as a host, even as a talking head, can sometimes be very challenging. And it's only a year later, with the 1-year anniversary of the passing of Kobe Bryant, that you start to really understand the gravity of what has taken place, what has happened. And I think it's rather fascinating to think about a year later. First of all, it tells you how fast a year's gone by. It feels like yesterday that we were just talking about Kobe's passing. But a year later, and again, with COVID, presidential elections, it's kind of easy for things to fall through the cracks. It's kind of easy for us to all forget everything that happened in 2020. Because we always do at the end of the year, these remembrances of what was 2020. And you forget that in the midst of everything that happened in 2020, Kobe Bryant died in 2020, along with his daughter Gigi, a budding basketball star herself, and friends of Kobe, this baseball coach. It's just, coach's kids. It's just an awful story all the way around. But it's pretty remarkable to think that 1 year ago today we were talking about the passing of Kobe Bryant, who I think could have had one of the all-time great post-NBA careers. Kobe wasn't perfect. And I think a year later we can actually have this conversation a bit more. The incident in Colorado, hotel worker, teenage hotel worker, the allegations of rape, the settlement of the case, the public disclosure of all of that, his wife still standing by him, but a lot of people looking at Kobe differently for a time as a result of that news and of that story. A year ago, you couldn't have that conversation when bringing everything together about who Kobe Bryant is and how you remember him. A year later, you can actually at least inject that, tactfully so, into the conversation. The case was settled. There was no admission of any guilt of anything, but it certainly colored our perspective on how we viewed Kobe Bryant. I viewed Kobe as a top 5 all-time player. I thought that if he could have gotten 1 more ring, 2 more rings, I would have considered him better than Michael Jordan. He couldn't get there. Obviously, he had the injuries late in his career. The Achilles injury obviously being the one that sort of ended any conversation about him being able to get another ring or 2 and being the GOAT. But he went out in a glorious fashion. The 60-point overtime game against the Utah Jazz. I remember sitting up watching it. And a remarkable career. He's a top 5 all-time player to me. But again, those are subjective conversations, much like the Hall of Fame, which we'll get into a little later on in the show with Bob Nightengale, and I'll give you my thoughts on the whole Curt Schilling situation. But a year later, and now that you've kind of had a chance to sit with the passing of Kobe Bryant, I'm curious to know what you think about the legacy of Kobe Bryant. What is his legacy? What is it that you most will remember him for 1 year later? After all the grief passes, at least for fans, obviously not for his family. His wife has obviously talked about the difficulties that she struggled with from a mental health perspective. What do you remember Kobe most for? Let me know. Put it in the chat box, and we'll get to those as we go throughout the show. It's another interesting day politically in the United States. And I'm not just going to focus on U.S. politics and U.S. stories, just for the first couple of days we are, but I do have some international stuff that I'll get to. Since we are on a global platform and people can watch us from anywhere in the world, we'll do some stories from time to time on some international things, and I've got some stuff I'm working on actually as we speak as we continue to go through the week. But the U.S. political environment right now really is the top story around much of the world. I had a chance to talk with John Aravosis on Monday of AmericaBlog and the UnPresidented Podcast, and got some thoughts from him on the state of politics around the world. We'll get to that coming up here in just a couple of minutes, and you could hear in John's own words what he has to say. But I'm going to tell you, if Republicans want a fight and they want to dig in their heels and pretend they're not the minority in Washington right now, which they are, they're going to be asking for trouble. Because right now, there's a couple of moderate Democrats that don't want to go full-blown nuclear and blow up the filibuster or pack the Supreme Court or try to jam things through at 51 votes. There's a couple of Democrats right now that are kind of hanging out in the middle of the Joe Manchins of the world, the Kristen Sinemas of the world, who don't want to go that route. But if Mitch McConnell and Republicans continue to dig in their heels and pretend they are not the minority in the Senate, that could change. We'll get into that with John Aravosis. Get some thoughts on the political realm in the U.S. coming up with him in just a couple of minutes. And I'll also get into some other news of the day. The Curt Schilling stuff we'll save for the end of the show. Got to make you stick around for something. Don't go anywhere. We got lots more to do. It's Up Late with Jason Page. Thanks for being with us. We welcome you back, Up Late with Jason Page on this Tuesday night. Back in the U.S. and grab a drink. Wednesday afternoon here in Singapore where we are, and it's a kind of a cloudy day. I want to get a camera that faces out the window so you guys could kind of see where we are in Singapore and get the same view that I get looking out our studio window here every day. Coming up later in the show, Bob Nightengale. We'll talk with him from USA Today, their senior MLB writer. Some thoughts on Curt Schilling being denied entry into the Hall of Fame, missing out by 16 votes. Nobody getting into the Hall of Fame this year. We'll get to that coming up. But yesterday I had a chance to have a lengthy conversation with John Aravosis from AmericaBlog. Does a terrific job there. Also the host of the UnPresidented Podcast. He's got a newsletter as well that you'll hear about towards the end of our conversation. I asked John Aravosis about the news that Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the former press secretary to President Donald Trump, the news that she would be running for governor of the great state of Arkansas. Take a listen to his response.
Not surprised at all if it was that one.
All right, technical difficulty with that. I'll fix it. And we'll get that to you coming up here in just a second. I inserted the wrong interview. So we'll get to that coming up in just a moment. And, yeah, so we'll fix it. It's all right. Only takes a second. Stand by. We'll fix that. All right, welcome you back. Up Late with Jason Page. All right, so technical difficulties are fixed. My conversation with John Aravosis from AmericaBlog and the UnPresidented Podcast. His thoughts now on a number of issues in the political realm, including the news that Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to run for governor in the state of Arkansas. There is I don't want to say it's half of America, but it's, I mean, look, I even talk about it within my own family, John. I'm 43 years old and born in Connecticut, state that always goes to the Democrats. Democratic senators, Rosa DeLauro has been there forever, and Democratic governor in office now with Ned Lamont.
Right.
And within my own family, and these are all people that grew up in Connecticut, I deal with the same 50-50 battle of half of my family is like, I don't get it. Why are people mad at Trump? And he did this, and I got to see their memes on Facebook telling me how great Trump was, and try not to literally unfriend family members.
I know.
It's not just Arkansas. It's not just Alabama with Tommy Tuberville. It's half of them. It really does feel like it's half of America.
The Chicago suburbs, I know people that I have to deal with on this, and I'm like, Chicago suburbs, we were relatively normal Republicans there.
Sure.
But they fell for the Trump thing. I don't understand how he's tapped into these people. And for a lot of these guys, it's not economic stuff. I think the racial explanation is frankly too simple, and it kind of pisses me off. Everyone wants a simple explanation. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Oh, they're all racist. I mean, they might be, but that's not what they were voting for. Obama won twice. You know what I mean?
Right.
If they were all racist, they would have stopped the guy the second time. They wouldn't have let him get elected the second time. I mean, even saying it was a boomerang against Obama, they should have boomeranged against Obama after 4 years. They wouldn't have gotten to help them get a right. I just think that's, again, it's too simplistic of an answer, But what scares me is on like everything we're seeing Republicans sort of excuse it. And again, that's not racism. That's we're seeing an excuse, whether you want to call it fascism, whether you want to call it authoritarianism, which a recent guest of ours called it, who was an expert on extremism. She was like, "It's not really fascism. It's more, authoritarian. It's more, Mussolini." And I'm like, "Oh, well, that's good." More Mussolini than Hitler. But
there's no question that misinformation is playing such a role in all of this. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, again, I'm on Facebook fact-checking family members and getting angry texts in the middle of the night because I'm in Singapore and it's 4 o'clock in the morning when it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon in New York. And I'm getting messages from family members saying, "Why'd you say that on so-and-so's Facebook feed? Because that's your family." Well, yeah, it's my family. It doesn't make them immune from posting lies and sounding like an idiot.
But again, think of who they're listening to, though, okay? I can sort of tell people on the left this. Imagine that Obama's still president, and there's some huge, horrific lie. Well, just that, I don't know what, but pick an equally horrific lie. And Obama has told us the lie. His VP has told us the lie. Chuck Schumer is telling us the lie. Nancy Pelosi is telling us the lie. And the TV network we trust, like in my case, it would be CNN. CNN, all the top people are telling me the same lie all day. Of course I'm going to believe it, because for me right now, I would absolutely, if all the people on CNN told me something, and Obama was telling me, and Pelosi and Schumer and everybody else was telling me, and all my other news services I like to follow are telling me it's true, I'm going to believe it's true. There's no way in hell they're not going to collude. They might get it wrong like Iraq, but they're not going to collude to get it wrong. In this case, you've literally got them colluding on the right to get it wrong. And I think it's such a grand conspiracy of lies that people can't even believe it could be done to them, I think. Because again, if the shoe were on the other foot, you and I would go, of course it's true. Obama's not going to lie to us and along in cahoots with CNN and everybody else. Right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they believe it in a really messed up way.
Yeah, but I don't think the left is without getting its lumps, though. I was watching CNN on Inauguration Day, and we were sitting here in the living room watching it. And
Right.
the giddiness that I saw, there was an interview with, I want to say it was John Kasich, Don Lemon,
Right.
and I can't remember who the third person was. But the three of them were sitting there and cackling and laughing at the expense of Trump. And you know what?
Right.
It's one thing if you want to, celebrate the inauguration of Joe Biden. But there is still 74.2 million people that voted for Donald Trump. And whether you want to call it liberal media bias, which I don't necessarily go all the way to that.
Right.
People are going to see that, and the right is going to use that to justify the idea that there is this liberal media bias.
Can we talk about, and this is interesting because I refused to weigh in online on this one, although we're going to do it right now, the New York Times editor who got fired.
Yes.
And I'm not going to, I'll tell you and your listeners, but online I was like, forget it. Everyone's freaking out. This New York Times editor, Biden comes on the private jet he took because Trump wouldn't give him the damn government plane, which he's supposed to do. Biden comes from Delaware. He comes flying in, and she tweets out, "Oh my God, I got chills seeing Biden's plane landing." Now, the implication was that, thank God it's Biden and we're getting rid of Trump was the implication. No one has disabused me of that fact. I mean, no one has argued, well, no, she didn't mean that. They're saying, well, because she was expressing joy at the fact that we were overthrowing an authoritarian government, that's something we should all express joy. Well, New York Times got upset and fired her. And now everyone's trying to say, she's got a dog she's got to take care of. And I mean, all these things, and you're like, oh, God. And I don't want to weigh in about it because I feel very bad for this woman.
Sure.
But Jesus Christ, what are you doing? And this is something a lot of journalists I see do. They get into expressing basically their personal opinions in a way that they would have, and they think doing it on Twitter is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why they think it's okay. Like, I can do it and you can do it because we're supposed to be partisans.
Well, even Jim Acosta, though, I mean, who I think is a fantastic reporter.
I love Acosta. Yeah.
I love him, and he's a reporter. But the problem is, if he goes on CNN or any other place, if I interview him, I'm going to ask for an opinion. And there was a day and age where reporters didn't give opinions. And now the lines have been completely blurred where they're all giving opinions.
The thing, okay, here's the problem with that, though, right? I remember talking to a colleague who runs a publication, we'll put it that way, at the beginning of the Trump era. And he had told me that they had like a whole editorial decision that they were going to take on Trump because they thought he was a threat to the Republic. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, and I remember we had a long talk about it because I was like, that's really, for an objective publication, that's really interesting to do. And I think Acosta, I know some reporters who don't like Acosta's take on it from CNN because they do feel like he's being biased. I feel like Acosta and Anderson Cooper and some of the others are doing exactly what they should have done because we did have an authoritarian threat to the country and they were taking him on the way it should have been taken on. I still think you're right, though. I don't know. Having said that, there's a difference in saying that and in Acosta saying, I got, chills when I saw Biden arriving. It's hard to say, but I feel like they're two sides of the line there.
Yeah.
This guy's an authoritarian. He's a horrible human being. This other one at least looks like he may be may not be crazy. That's different than saying, yay for the other one. It's a nuance, but right? Acosta's giving his objective analysis of the fact that this guy's a fascist.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just feel like we were literally, the guardrails of democracy in the U.S., that the country was literally within one bad decision from a judge potentially to losing it all.
Yeah.
Like it was that close.
Or how about, I forgot if it was 12,000 votes or whatever it was, maybe 20,000 between three states again. Yeah. Under Hillary, it was like 75,000 between three states. Now it was a lot less. Yeah. This son of a bitch could have been elected again because the idiot Electoral College, right? By popular vote, what did we win by 7 million or
Yes.
so,
Yep.
right? But by the stupid electoral vote, a couple states could have swung it with just a couple thousand votes. I can't even imagine, especially with what he did on the way out. The only, I don't even want to say saving grace, because it's not a saving grace, but the only silver lining I can try to find from what happened on January 6th was maybe this guy finally exposed himself for who he really is. Having said that, impeachment's going not so well, because even that one, again, he got 6 people. Let's count the poor officer who killed himself.
Yeah.
He got 6 people killed. I mean, he's a freaking cop killer, basically.
Yeah.
And that's not even enough.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see
I don't know.
from a legal perspective, and I look forward to getting a legal mind on to talk about it. What happens with him now? I literally thought he was going to walk out of the White House, get to Mar-a-Lago, and get perp walked within about a half an hour.
Yeah.
So I've already been wrong about that. I thought there was going to be some prosecutor that was going to jump up and say, "Yep, I'm going to be the one to take him down." I'm kind of shocked it hasn't happened yet. We'll see
I'm shocked
how
that
long
they
it
didn't do all
takes.
the pardons either. That they didn't do all the pardons blew me away too. And I still haven't seen, like, we've seen stories on it, but I haven't seen like an in-depth what actually happened. What did his White House counsel tell him that so freaked him out? He didn't pardon himself. I mean, even if it wouldn't stood in court, go for it.
Right.
What's the
I
downside,
said the same
right?
thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Although we don't know. Some have suggested this. We don't know that he hasn't put one in his pocket.
Well, that's what worried me, because I read that article that said that
Yes.
that just because he pardoned somebody doesn't mean he has to say it publicly.
Doesn't have
So
to
I
say it
could see the
publicly.
son of, and actually, you're right. No, that's he. Actually, I know, because one of the other arguments they made was, well, if you pardon, you're going to have to delineate specific crimes, and Don Jr. doesn't want to confess to a specific crime. Well, why don't you give him a general pardon and let it go to court and see what happens?
Absolutely.
And that way you haven't admitted to a specific crime. I mean, things like that. Because for example, I could see, like on the tax stuff with Trump Tower, if you give a pardon and it's considered a confession, now in state court, have you just lost the case because you've confessed in essence? Fair enough. But, a Trump pardoning, I don't know. I'm glad. Well, as you said, I hope he didn't pardon himself and everybody else. If he didn't, I hope this guy has a long life ahead of him of states attorney generals coming after, or attorneys general coming after him.
John Aravosis, Unpresidented Podcast. Also, AmericaBlog does a terrific job. John, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for being on Up Late.
And my new Substack, Cyber Disobedience.
Oh, see, everybody's got a Substack. I've got one coming out next week. Everybody's got a Substack. Yeah.
It's the cool kids. We're the cool kids.
John, I appreciate it. Thanks. Go give that dog some water, please.
No, she needs some love.
Thanks, John.
She's a terror. All right, bye, guys.
I love John. Always has some interesting insights. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but he has passionate opinions. He's well-informed. He is somebody that has been in the D.C. bubble for a very long time, worked with the United Nations, has a lot of good contacts and always interesting information and thoughts with him. So, very interestingly, and I don't know how many people saw it, as much as we focused on the insurrection attempt at in the nation's capital and this attack, this coup attempt, whatever you want to call it, terrorist attack, the stories that have emerged in the days after, both the video, the harrowing experiences of the Capitol Police and the D.C. police that came in to try and quell what was going on well after the fact, of course. Of all the things that kind of blows my mind, the one that blows my mind the most is the story of the lack of preparedness. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I know people say that and they're like, you're going to play both sides. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. The lack of preparedness as it relates to knowing there could be this potential for violence at the Capitol and virtually nothing being done to stop it. I was reading a story before we came to air today about a briefing from law enforcement about the failure in terms of preparation. If there's one thing that drives me nuts most about the U.S. The one thing that bothers me most is the fact that we are a reactive country before ever being proactive. Give me a time in U.S. history. Anybody watching on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, YouTube. Give me a time in U.S. history where we stopped something before it happened. And don't say, well, how do you know? You always have to be one step ahead of terrorists or a plague or blah, 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 blah. Tell me one time in any regard that the U.S. has been proactive as opposed to reactive. Gun violence? No. Terrorism? 9/11? No. Sandy Hook? Gun shootings in schools? COVID? And these are all things that we've had ample opportunity for action on. Pro-action versus reaction. And time again, the United States has come up short for all of its resources. Big Brother's watching, FISA warrants, we can listen in on calls, we've got satellites that can zoom down and watch people walking on the streets of Afghanistan, and we can see where Osama bin Laden is, or a terrorist leader in Iran. Yet we never are able to stop it, whatever it may be. It's the one thing I have always found that drives me the most insane. 2 members attending a House Appropriations Committee, a briefing, telling CNN on Tuesday it was dumb luck more people didn't die. House Appropriations Committee Chair Rosa DeLauro said in a phone call with CNN, members were shaking their heads in disbelief. The Capitol Police Chief, Yogananda Pittman, admitted her department knew there was a strong potential for violence targeting Congress, but did not take appropriate steps to prevent it. And think about that. Can you imagine, for just a moment, what would have happened? What would have transpired had more weapons been in the crowd? Had some police officers not made very brave decisions? I mean, think about how bad this thing could have gotten. Everybody wants to kind of poo-poo it and, oh, it was just a select few people. No. This could have been so much worse than it wound up being. I mean, it really blows your mind. It really blows your mind when you get down to it and start to think about it. It was that close. It was that close to being something far worse than anything this country's ever seen. I think about the TV show. It's going to sound like a stupid comparison. Anybody ever seen the TV show Commander-in-Chief? I think it was Commander-in-Chief. No, what was the one? Designated Survivor. It was on for a couple of seasons. Kiefer Sutherland winds up becoming the president because everybody gets killed. The president, vice president, the Congress gets wiped out because of an attack on the Capitol during, I think, the State of the Union address. And Kiefer Sutherland winds up being the president. When you think about it, we were that close to an event, not on that scale, but pretty damn close. Pretty damn close. And you just wonder how it could have possibly been allowed to get to that point. While most of the news networks tonight were talking about things that were serious and actually matter in the world, just to show you how we live in 2 different Americas. And this will be the last thing I do on politics, and then I want to get into the Curt Schilling and the Hall of Fame not voting anybody in for the 2021 induction ceremony. which I don't even know if they're having this year. I actually have to look that up. While most of America was talking with and having conversations about, things that matter on most of their networks, Tucker Carlson of Fox News was interviewing the MyPillow guy. Did you see the MyPillow guy? Mike Lindell was kicked off of Twitter. So Twitter's going at it now. They have laid down the line, and they've decided that if you're somebody that is a habitual liar or putting out alternate facts on what's actually happening around the world, and you have a large audience, they're going to silence you. I don't like the timing of it. I think it's coming at. I think it's something they should have taken steps towards doing gradually a long time ago, because of the myriad lies that Donald Trump and a lot of his minions were telling. But now doing it all at once, this purge all at once of people not telling the truth on social media, it's just going to pile on to an already more volatile situation in America. And ultimately, another platform is going to pop up, whether it's Parler making a return or some other platform. Some conservative with a lot of money is going to launch their own Twitter of sorts, their Facebook of sorts, Parler again being an example. And those opinions that many disagree with, they're just going to find another place to live. And as much as we are divided in America right now, and as much as there is this divide amongst the tech community and all these different things, it's only going to grow bigger. But Mike Lindell, MyPillow guy, no longer on Twitter. All right, we're coming back in a couple minutes. I got to get into some baseball before we wrap up the program. The final word on tonight's show will go to Bob Nightengale, senior MLB writer over at USA Today. He is a Hall of Fame voter. How did he vote when it came to Curt Schilling potentially getting into the Hall of Fame? I'll get some thoughts with Bob Nightengale on that and the news that Schilling is not going into the Hall of Fame in 2021 and he wants out. He doesn't want to be on the ballot for 2022. What will the Hall of Fame decide to do about that? We'll find out as well. So stick around. We got a lot more to do. Up Late with Jason Page, all over social media. We're all on your favorite streaming platforms and all that. Stick around. Lots more to do. And by the way, I'll answer your questions during the break if you guys have anything you want to throw into the chat room. So feel free, send us your questions, especially on Curt Schilling, because we'll be talking about that next. Love to get your thoughts. Stay with us. All right, well, welcome back. Up Late with Jason Page. Good to be hanging out with you on this Tuesday night, 14 minutes short of midnight, 12:46 p.m. in Singapore on Wednesday afternoon. Wherever you're watching, I am grateful for you doing so. This is just our second show. We'll be doing upgrades and different things in terms of the format and the layout of the show as we move through the next couple of days and weeks and things like that. So I appreciate you guys tuning in today. We started out the show with some sports, and on a bit of a somber note, obviously, on Mamba Day, the day that Kobe Bryant 1 year ago was killed in that horrific helicopter crash that so many of us today remember. But there was other big sports news on Tuesday in the U.S. that I wanted to talk about, and it's the story of Curt Schilling. Curt Schilling, up for the 9th time. You get 10 tries on the Hall of Fame ballot. As long as you clear over a certain number of votes every year, you stay on the ballot. Curt Schilling was on the ballot for his 9th time in what will ultimately be 10 opportunities for him to get in, courtesy of the Baseball Writers Association of America. Then it goes to the Veterans Committee, the Retirees Committee, and they could potentially put you in after your 10 years has expired. They have the option to do that. But I think, surprisingly to me, Curt Schilling didn't get into the Hall of Fame. He needed 75% of the vote. He came up just shy of that number. I believe he got, I'll have to look up the number. I think he got, I had it in front of me. Schilling got, let me see if I can find it here. Here it is. Schilling got 70% of the vote. Right on the number. 70% of the vote. He needed to get 75% of the vote. He was 16, as the numbers go, he was 16 votes short of the number he needed to be inducted into this class of the Hall of Fame. So Curt Schilling kept out of the Hall of Fame by 16 votes. That small of a number. I'm sorry, I said 71%. He got 70% of the vote. He needed 75%. He got 70% of the vote. You need to appear on 75% of all ballots. He got 70%. I'm surprised. I thought he was going to get in. There had been 1 or 2 or 3 writers who wanted to rescind their vote for Schilling after his support for the insurrection at the Capitol. His support for that, and basically his doubling down for support on that. That didn't happen, but it turned out it didn't matter. He didn't have enough votes anyway. Now Schilling is saying he doesn't want to be on the ballot in 2022 for his 10th and final try to make the Hall of Fame. And I'll ask Bob Nightengale whether or not that will take place, whether they'll honor his wishes and take him off the ballot, or whether they just leave him on there because that's their policy and that's how they operate. But Curt Schilling's being kept off largely because of controversial comments he has made. Comments about Hitler. Comments about transgender people. A lot of stuff in the political realm. You can go look it all up yourself. Remember, he got fired from ESPN several years back. And there was the outrage over, whether or not that was fair or not. But ESPN at that point was making a stand against their hosts getting political in any sort of realm. And it even happened with some of their more liberal announcers, Jamel Hill being a perfect example of that. Somebody I've talked to in the past. So there's a number of examples here of Curt Schilling. There's plenty of evidence out there for the character issue, which is a clause inside the voting mechanism for the Baseball Writers Association of America. They can look at character as a deciding factor as to whether or not, or one of many factors, as to whether or not a player belongs in the Hall of Fame. Here's the problem for Curt Schilling, as far as I see it. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, even if I take all the political stuff out of the equation. He's not a Hall of Famer. He had 216 wins. His career ERA was about 3.5. Yes, I know the bloody sock story. Yes, I know what he did in the postseason. He had great numbers in the playoffs. I am not questioning any of that. Almost a strikeout per inning. I get it. He was a really good pitcher. Forget all the stuff about him being a horrible human being now, if that's what you think. He was a really good pitcher, but it's not the Hall of Really Good Pitchers. It's the Hall of Fame. Curt Schilling doesn't belong there. By the numbers, go look at him. Yeah, the postseason stuff will stick out, but he's not a Hall of Famer. He's a really good pitcher. And the problem for him is players on that sort of bubble, which, by the way, to me, there shouldn't be a bubble. If you are 60-40 on a guy being a Hall of Famer, he's not a Hall of Famer. If you're, I think he's just over the line, you're not a Hall of Famer. Hall of Famers are no doubters. That's why I don't think Craig Biggio's a Hall of Famer. Yeah, I know he has 3,000 hits. He was a compiler. Never the best player at his position. Never an MVP. No World Series. I mean, what makes Craig Biggio a Hall of Famer aside from the fact that he played for a long time and performed at a good level, not a Hall of Fame level? I don't think Craig Biggio's a Hall of Famer. You're either a Hall of Famer or you're not. And in the case of Curt Schilling, take out the political nonsense. And I mean the nonsense he has perpetrated. The guy's not a Hall of Famer. He's a really good player. He's a really good player, and that's it. The other news from this class of 2021 for the Hall of Fame is the fact that there is no class. Somebody had asked me, what about Derek Jeter? Derek Jeter is going into the Hall of Fame as part of the 2020 class when they do have another induction ceremony, and I don't know if they're having one this year, obviously, because of concerns arising from COVID-19. But there's not going to be a single person going into the Hall of Fame, at least from the writers, this year. Now, again, the Veterans Association or whatever it is, they can choose to put somebody in, but nobody's going in this year as it relates to the Hall of Fame and the Baseball Writers Association. The guys that got closest, Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, also in their 9th year of eligibility, which means next year is their last year. Otherwise, they have to get put in by the veterans. Clemens got 61%. Again, you need 75%. Barry Bonds got 60.7%. And for both of those players, that is not a significant rise. Not a significant rise to the point that you would think they're going to get in on their 10th try. So you're going to have a Hall of Fame that doesn't have Barry Bonds, the all-time home run leader, and Roger Clemens, one of the all-time great pitchers in the game. And I think that's bogus. I think they both belong in. But let's talk about Curt Schilling, and we do so with Bob Nightengale, who does a terrific job with USA Today as their senior Major League Baseball writer, somebody I've turned to for years. Bob, on a scale of 1 to 10, your level of shock that Curt Schilling did not get into the Hall of Fame.
Did you see the
All right, we'll try to fix that. A little bit of a hiccup throwing to the Bob Nightengale interview. I've had a couple of those today, but we'll fix it. Don't worry. We'll get that worked out here in just a second. So I asked Bob Nightengale, scale of 1 to 10 again. Scale of 1 to 10, where would he put Curt Schilling not getting into the Hall of Fame? Scale of 1 to 10, what was it for him? Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, not surprised at all. So is that 1? Maybe 2. Just, the Twitter killed him. If not for Twitter, he's probably about 85%. At least 80%. So, people were upset with his views on Twitter and that the hatred and everything else. we'll see what happens next year. I think if he tames things down and stays off social media, I think he's in, even though he doesn't want to be. If he keeps going on, I think he's off.
Well, he's requested to be taken off the ballot. Is there any precedent for anybody doing that? And what has the Hall done in those situations?
No, he can't be taken off. I remember Jack Morris getting upset at one point. I want to say Burt Blyleven might have too. So, yeah, you can't be taken off the ballot. You can vote for whoever you want. I mean, he's eligible to be on the 10th year. Maybe some guys will vote for him now just to spite him. So, yeah, he cannot take himself off the ballot.
I'm curious as to whether or not, and I don't know if you made your ballot public. I didn't get a chance to look. Did you vote for him?
I did. I don't like what he says at all. But my line is he wasn't doing this as a player. If he's doing this as a player, he would have divided the clubhouse and been, almost like the clubhouse cancer, and he would not have got my vote. But, he's a different career now. It's nothing to do with his playing career. So I did vote for him for that reason.
Would you have, I know there were a number of voters that wanted to take back their vote for him after the end of the year deadline. Were you one of those voters that would have liked to have taken your vote back? Would that have been the straw that broke the camel's back for you?
No, it wouldn't have, Jason. I think just one voter asked for that. He got blown out of proportion. Just one voter asked. When he was almost it seemed like he was in support of the insurrection there. But no, I would not have asked for my vote out.
Does this bring about a fair question about whether we've reached sort of a shifting point with the Hall of Fame when it comes to the character issue? Is Schilling sort of the new case study for that? And what does it mean for players going forward in terms of how they're going to have to monitor their behavior if they're going to wind up getting in? Or is it strictly because it's a political issue and it's so highly emotional and charged that has something to do with it?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a combination of the politics, the hatred on the Twitter, almost inviting conflict, that sort of thing. So I don't think anything needs to change. I mean, Omar Vizquel lost votes too when the allegations from his ex-wife that he physically abused her. So he lost votes that way too. We also obviously have the steroid guys. So it's almost like different classifications. With Omar Vizquel, do people penalize him because of the allegations from the ex-wife? It's after he got done playing. So it's almost a lot of gray lines.
Are you surprised that nobody got in?
No, I'm not. I thought Schilling had the only chance, and I think people were so upset with Schilling. You realized he wasn't going to get it. So no, it was too big of a climb for Clemens and Bonds. I thought they'd have a little bit more of a bump. Yeah, they didn't. They pretty much flatlined at 61%. Not looking good for them next year. But no, I couldn't expect anyone to get in once it looked like Schilling had no chance.
Bob Nightengale gets the last word tonight on Up Late with Jason Page, senior MLB writer, does a great job with USA Today. Bob, I always appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Sure, my pleasure. Take care, Jason.
Love talking with Bob. Always has great thoughts. Somebody who's covered the game for a very long time and somebody I've always been glad to turn to when we need to get a thought on Major League Baseball. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of Up Late with Jason Page. Just our second show. Not bad, right? If you like it, subscribe. Subscribe to our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Intersecting Media. There's the Intersecting Media Facebook page. Follow that. I'm on Twitter at the back page. We have a YouTube channel for Intersecting Media. Go check out all of them. We got the newsletter launching next week. Podcast launching its second season next week. I don't know where I'm going to find the time to do it all, but we'll figure it out together. To all of you back in the United States, take care of yourselves. All around the world, everybody have a great day. I'm Jason Page. We'll catch you back here next time. Up Late. Thanks for being with me.